I'm Avery, the host of Dream Job Diaries, the podcast where you can hear real stories of real careers, the good, the bad, and everything in between. Find out how people turn their passions into paychecks. Today's guest is Michelle Johal, who is a criminal defense lawyer. In this episode, we discuss what a career in law really looks like. We discuss the impacts of the pandemic, qualifications required, and ways that anyone can learn more. Hi, thank you for coming today. Do you think you could introduce yourself and do kind of like a brief summary of what you do?
Hi, Avery. Thank you for having me. My name is Michelle Johal. I'm a criminal defense lawyer. I represent individuals who are before the court and dealing with the criminal justice system.
So what does kind of like a day-to-day look like? Is it kind of like different every day, or is it kind of the same?
So every day looks different. It depends whether or not I'm in court having a contested trial or whether I'm engaged in trial preparation or if I'm doing client meetings and reviewing material that's been provided by the Crown.
Okay. What would you say is like your favorite part of your job, and like what do you like enjoy most that you do?
I regularly represent individuals who've never had any previous dealing with the criminal justice system. So, what I enjoy is helping to guide what I describe as regular, everyday people through the process that's really unfamiliar to them, and try and guide them to the best possible outcome in their case. Another thing that I enjoy doing is I regularly represent young people who are charged under the Youth Criminal Justice Act. That's something that I find to be particularly rewarding. I have two teenagers of my own, and I recognize that young people often make poor decisions that should not reflect the rest of their lives. And so I try and help them deal with the youth criminal justice system.
Okay, great. Now we're just kind of gonna like take a step back to more like how you got to this point in your career. So, when did you get your first job, and what was it?
My first job was when I was 16 years of age. I worked in retail and I worked at a retail establishment that sold jeans. It was called Blue Notes and it doesn't exist anymore, but it would probably be familiar to some of the people that listen to your podcast.
Did you enjoy doing it, and do you think it was like valuable, and like having jobs in like teens is valuable for like other people?
I really enjoyed working in retail. It taught me a lot of really essential skills. One is how to fold clothes. I'm being a bit facetious, but it taught me how to interact with members of the public. I still remember sometimes I'd be assigned to the role of greeter. So as a greeter, you would just greet the potential customer who walks into the store and you just say hello to them and you just say how are you and ask them how they're doing. So it definitely helped me develop communication skills. I think having a job is really important because there's a lot of formative skills that you acquire. I appreciate it's hard for young people to find jobs now, especially in this economy. But to the extent that a job can be found, I think that it's really valuable.
When you were younger, so this could be like when you were a teenager or like a young adult, what did you want to do, like career or work wise, or like did you have an idea? Did you know that you wanted to like go into law?
So I didn't actually know that I wanted to go into law when I was a teenager or a young adult. I did an English degree at the University of Toronto, and I had aspired to teach English. I still can vividly remember going to the Faculty of Education at the University of Toronto campus and making inquiries with respect to applying to Teachers College. And I distinctly remember them telling me that there were not going to be a lot of job opportunities for English teachers in that economy. And there were certainly a demand for uh, women who wanted to teach STEM, so science, obviously, and math. But I um, did not have the background to be a science or a math teacher. And so it was after I gave up my aspirations with respect to becoming a teacher that I explored applying to law school. I then applied to law school and I got in, but before I got into law school, I had to write what's called the LSAT. It's the law school admissions test. And I wrote the LSAT and I secured a good result. And then I applied to a number of Ontario law schools and I ended up choosing Queen's Law School.
So you spoke kind of about that, but like could you just like quickly explain again like what level of education and like experience was kind of required to get to like your point or just kind of earlier on in your career?
Yes, so I did my first degree at the University of Toronto. I did an honors Bachelor of Arts degree, and then I went to law school at Queen's University. I spent 3 years there studying in law school. Then before I could be called to they call it being called to the bar. That's the process of becoming a lawyer. I had to complete a 1 year internship program. That internship program in the profession is known as articling, where you work with an articling principal or a firm and acquire hands on practical experience for a year. And then you're required to write the barrister exams and then the solicitor exams. So these are exams that are administered by the Law Society of Ontario. They're called licensing exams. And so, if I were to sum up everything that was required, it was an undergrad degree, law school, articling, and then writing what's otherwise known as the bar admission or licensing exams. And so it was certainly a long road, 4 years of undergrad, 3 years of law school, 1 year internship, and then the licensing exam.
So currently, what's the hardest part of your job or the one you like the least?
The hardest part of my job is often managing client expectations and recognizing that I don't have the ability to make all of my clients' charges go away. I often say that I don't have a magic wand or the ability to just magically make criminal charges go away. I'm not always able to get charges dropped during resolution discussions with the prosecution, and I'm not always able to win a case after it proceeds to a contested trial. In fact, sometimes I lose cases and then my clients are found guilty. Clients hire me with the expectation that they're not going to be found guilty and that there's going to be some legal loophole that I can assist them in finding and that they won't be found guilty of the offense for which they're charged. But the reality is, while in a great number of cases, favorable outcomes can be negotiated or obtained, you can't win every case. And so that's the hardest part of my job is trying to manage client expectations and let them know that I don't have the ability to wave a magic wand to make everything go away.
Is this something that's gotten like easier as you've gotten more experience, or is it still like as hard as it was like earlier on in your career?
It's still difficult to try and, for example, today I had to tell a client that in preparing for his case that's coming up for trial, I didn't see any potential legal defenses for charter violations. And the client was naturally very devastated to learn that he may be found guilty. There's significant consequences that can flow from that. It doesn't really get any easier. It should get easier, but because of some of the significant consequences to my clients, I'll use other examples. I mean, for some people, it means a loss of liberty. It means that they have to go to jail and serve a jail sentence. For others who are not Canadian citizens and are trying to secure permanent residence or citizenship in Canada, having a criminal conviction can have devastating consequences that can result in their removal from the country. And so that's a lot of pressure, knowing that the outcome of someone's criminal case may lead to immigration proceedings where they're subject to deportation or removal or a loss of liberty.
Do you find it like stressful being in court? Like, have you gotten like, has it become less stressful over time? How do
The
you like
process
feel that?
over time, the process of advocating for my clients and representing them in court proceedings has obviously gotten easier, but being the bearer of bad news and knowing what profound consequences a criminal conviction can carry with it, and and recognizing that it can have a devastating impact on families or my clients' employment or their liberty is still something that is difficult to deal with on a daily basis.
Okay, now, what's a skill that helps you to perform well that people might not like easily think of?
Oral communication skills are obviously one of the most important skills that I need to have as a lawyer, especially when we're in court. So I think that any way that people can try and develop their oral communication skills is something that I would recommend. I know that high schools often have debating teams. There's other resources in the community that encourage people to improve their public speaking. And those are the sorts of things that I would recommend that people undertake. Um, During the pandemic, obviously, there was a period of time where everybody was learning online. And I feel that for some young people in particular, the communication skills lagged behind because they weren't obviously exposed to in person learning every day. And so trying to work on your oral communication skills is what I would recommend.
What would you say is one of the biggest challenges you've faced or had to overcome in your career or like education, like getting to this point?
One of the biggest challenges that I had to overcome was writing the LSAT, which is the law school admission test. It was fortunately when I wrote the LSAT for the final time, I did secure a good score that allowed me to get into law school, but it was very difficult writing the exams, and I had to repeat them. I essentially wrote the exams and then dropped them and didn't find out what my final score was. And so the LSAT was something that I had to write on more than one occasion. And I ultimately ended up taking preparatory courses to help me master the art of writing the law school admission test. I took a speed reading course to help me read material and absorb material faster. And writing that exam was a very difficult process. I know that a number of people who apply to law school also have a similar experience because the LSAT is a standardized test that's meant to test your innate knowledge, and it's difficult to study for.
How long did you spend like preparing for the LSAT?
Many, many months. So many weeks and months, taking preparatory courses and writing um, sample tests and doing practice tests and taking the speed reading course that I referenced earlier and other courses that were available at the time.
Are there any misconceptions about your career?
There's a lot of misconceptions about my career. One of the biggest misconceptions is that I try and help my clients avoid the consequences associated with their actions, and that I'm somehow an accomplice to what they've done, or I condone what they've done. That's one of the biggest misconceptions. I represent a number of people charged with criminal code driving offenses that involve allegations of impaired driving or driving in excess of the legal limit. That doesn't mean that I condone drinking and driving. It's something I take very seriously, and that's one of the biggest misconceptions associated with the work that I do, that somehow I don't take the underlying offense seriously or the conduct seriously.
How is your industry changing and like have you had to adapt? Is there anything you think's gonna happen in the future?
Things changed dramatically in my profession after the pandemic. Obviously, after March the 20th, um, things changed for everybody in every industry. I understand that across the board, people had to make changes, but the most dramatic changes, um, I think, were noticed in the legal profession because we weren't allowed, at least in the beginning, to attend court in person. Courts, the court shut down at the end of March of 2020, and they didn't reopen to the public in person until July of 2020. And during that time, there was a transition to what is known as virtual court or Zoom court. So, to cut down on the number of people coming in person to the courthouses, the courts introduced virtual court or Zoom court for administrative court dates and for bail hearings, because the law requires that people who are arrested with offenses be brought before a justice within 24 hours. Initially, it pivoted to telephone hearings, and then from telephone hearings, it pivoted to virtual court or Zoom hearings. We still use Zoom court today, although contested matters are done in person again, but we still use Zoom court regularly for matters that are not contested.
I'm interested in knowing more about what it was like for you to have to like do court like over Zoom or online and like was it like strange to pivot to that?
It was very strange to pivot to it, but what was really refreshing about Zoom Court is that I didn't have to drive everywhere and travel considerable distances. So, for example, if I had a case downtown or a case in Brampton, I didn't have to undertake the long commute. I just had to simply click on a link and then attend court that way. It was very convenient from that perspective because it eliminated the need to drive. It also was convenient to appear from your home. And I certainly felt a lot safer because you'll remember there was a period of time that we were on lockdown and discouraged from interacting with others for fear of contracting the virus when before the vaccines were available. And I did feel safer because I wasn't obviously in a busy courthouse filled with people.
What was or has been the most memorable moment you've had in your career? It could be like positive or negative.
The most memorable moment I had is when I was interviewed by the agenda with Steve Paikin about the work that I do. And that was before the pandemic, where I went in person and I went to the studio and I was involved in a panel discussion, and that was aired on live TV. Subsequently, I was fortunate enough to do a few interviews with CBC and various other media outlets. That was definitely the most memorable part of my career was having the opportunity to comment on legal issues and legal developments. And that was what I enjoyed the most.
Is there anything you wish you had done like differently when you were like younger or earlier in your career? Like I know you mentioned that you weren't initially interested in going into law. Was there anything you think you could have done differently, or are you like happy how everything worked out?
One thing that I encourage everybody to do is earlier on in their career, I encourage them to join professional associations and to get involved in these local organizations. When I was a young lawyer getting started, I didn't really see the value in having these professional memberships or affiliations. And it wasn't until I became a more senior lawyer during the pandemic that I joined a professional organization and then had an opportunity to connect with other like minded professionals. So, my advice to young professionals starting out is try and be as actively involved in professional associations as possible. And this also extends to students. If you're attending law school, get involved with the local law associations, run for student government, be connected to your peers because you never know in the future these could be a source of referrals and friendships.
What would you suggest doing for individuals who are interested in like going into law or just learning more about it?
So I recommend that people do research about the Ontario Justice Education Network. It's a charitable, not for profit, non governmental organization that has a province wide mandate. They develop educational tools and introduce young people to the justice system, and they help them understand the law and build their legal capability. OGEN's programs are delivered across Ontario, and I often have seen OGEN students attend at the local courthouses. Thousands of high school students and their teachers participate in OGEN programs every year, and they come to the court to observe legal proceedings. And so, before the pandemic, when everything was in person, it was not uncommon to see high school students, maybe 10 to 15 walk into a courtroom looking to observe. Courtrooms, people forget, are open to the public and anyone can go and observe legal proceedings. And I think it's important to see the courthouse. And then when you attend as part of OGEN, the judges try and take an opportunity to address you or justices of the peace or other criminal justice participants, try and mentor or provide information to high school students about what working in the criminal justice system looks like.
What would you say to people, like young adults, students, whatever, who are unsure about what they're interested in doing or what they want to do with their career or life?
It's a really tough question. What I would suggest that they do is try and attend a university fair. I had the opportunity to do that recently with my son, who's a teenager, and to speak to the people that are at the fair about what they did for their undergraduate degree and what they did after they graduated, and try and get an idea of what you're interested in by speaking to as many people as you possibly can at the university fairs.
And then you mentioned earlier that like public speaking skills are like really useful and like there are activities people can do to like improve them. Is there any other skills or like experience you think would be beneficial for people to try to prepare for like their future?
Public speaking, I think, is the most important, and trying to find ways to improve your public speaking skills. are important. I know that there's an organization that I've attended in the past that's called Toastmasters. I don't know if it's something that you're familiar with, but what they do is they help people develop and further their public speaking skills. Obviously, another really important skill are writing skills. And so I would suggest that people avail themselves of any writing workshops. And I think it's particularly important for young people to take any writing workshops that might be available at their high school or outside of high school, because I know that young people use technology to communicate with one another and they communicate using text message. But I think that a lot has been lost in terms of using abbreviations, and it's important to go back to basics and learn um, how to speak and write using full sentences.
Okay. Thank you so much for coming. I've definitely learned a lot and this has been like very interesting. Is there anything else you want to add or
Uh, I think that this is very entrepreneurial of you, Avery, and this is just an example of what I was talking about. You taking this initiative to create this podcast and try and educate other young people about different careers. I think it's an excellent idea. And listening to your podcast will assist people that are learning about different careers and give them a sense of direction in terms of next steps. So, kudos to you for taking this initiative and embracing technology and using it in a positive way and learning how to make podcasts.
thank you so much. If you've made it to the end of this episode, thank you so much for listening. If you have any feedback, reviews, questions, or are looking to be on an episode, feel free to comment or send me an email. Thank you so much for listening and have a fantastic day.